Hello, it's March 23rd, 2017. I'm Tony Samario, coming to you from BroSal.org YouTube channel with an End Times Trending. And as you can hear, my voice just seems to be getting worse. Yesterday, again, I wound up in a very long conversation, so apologize for that, but I'm appreciative that it seems a few people are coming out of the shadows to comment on the last couple of commentaries that we've put out, and I appreciate that because it livens up the conversation and helps me see a variety of perspectives in the way that my own insight or research is affecting others. So thank you. Please continue to comment. And so today I want to talk about something. I really believe the more people I talk to, I see that, everyone would love to know what's going on right now. The world seems so crazy. It's hard to know what to do, how to raise your kids, how to plan for the future. Do you sell the house? Do you buy a new house? Do you put the kids in college? Do you take them out of school? What do you do now? I was just talking to someone this morning, talking about, they're just doing their best to try and oust Donald Trump. And I think, wow, to be caught up in their narrative of how to save the world, fix the world, fight the bad guy, because you get in a position where what else do you do as a responsible person that's still got a soul and a heart? You want to do your best. You want to provide for your family. You want to make the world a better place, hopefully. And so there's all these people stuck in this position right now, and they don't know what to do, because what I keep trying to present to people is this: it's because the status quo is changing very fast. And yet nobody's prepared for that, because meanwhile the presentation, the media and the presentation of the world follows a narrative trajectory different from what's actually happening in the world. For instance, the economy, it's getting better. Even though the consumer spending's at an all-time low, and the materials that the manufacturers buy to produce new things is at an all-time low. Student loans are at an all-time high, right? You get all these people coming out of college, no work, no economy anywhere now. Not Europe, not China, not America. It's all, so if you don't have an idea of what's really going on, that they're telling you these stories in the media, in the narrative of the world is a big, magic show, like a Hollywood presenting a movie script. And if you don't get on that notion, I believe this moment in history is going to be is going to feel quite devastating, because the status quo is going to suddenly, it's been gradually becoming something else for most of my life, decades. When you look back to the Reagan era and the changing of some sort of, economic controls that kept a little bit of a security net, let's say, for the workforce, the things that they had to concede after the last time they stole all the money and property. They had to give a few concessions to keep the people working, unions and these kinds of things. And then you can watch over time how those were undermined, so that the unions could still make a show, but they had no teeth. And over time, the workers become what they are today, and almost meaningless, or at least insignificant in the sense of a powerful voice in the politic of the nation. It's all about what GE and Lockheed Martin and, Halliburton, Standard Oil, or all, companies you don't even know. People that sit on trilateral commissions and, members of the CFR sitting around deciding what policy should be. And over time, you just see that they keep telling you it's all for your good and that the economy's stronger and politics is better and the lies are fewer. And now, of course, we're very fortunate to have fact checkers that can, stop information like mine from reaching your ears because it doesn't meet the criteria of modern, the level of illusion in modern propaganda is such, in a very Orwellian sense, that they can present you with the facts and now label those as the fictions, so that the fictional narrative can become inseparable from a factual narrative. And we live in this, what my philosopher friend calls a post-Orwellian age, when even the Orwellian sort of controls are giving way to a truth movement designed to make all understanding of facts incomprehensible. How can there be a truth? Everything is presented now as two sides, as a dualism, and everybody just has to choose a side, and by choosing a side, it seems to automatically set you against another side. So that, the real solutions you find in a family, let's say, should we move to the east or should we move to the west? Normally, you don't just divide the family and remain as two warring entities, one in the east and one in the west. You consider as a family the best course of action, and you take that course of action as a family. Maybe you say, we decide we'll move to the west. And maybe after some time you say, geez, did we make the right decision? And the family says, geez, maybe we should move to the east and see if we've made the right decision. Now, that's a reasonable way of covering the left-right paradigm, because you're doing it together in the seeking of an answer. But our problems these days and our the things that are facing us are never presented that way, as if we're all in it together, whether we choose the conservative paradigm or the liberal paradigm, we all have to live with it. So the conversation should be aimed at unity rather than division, where, how can we all come to some sort of vision as to why we would go to the left or to the right, so that the conversation was always about each side monitoring the thing we were all prepared to do, so that, of course, we could backtrack if we had to. Just like a family, just like any small company trying to make it in a business environment, just like any group of naturalists out forging their way through uncharted territory in nature. You're after a collective goal, which in the case of, say, the United States of America or any national government is for the betterment of your citizen. In our case, we pretend to be a representative government in which the government's representing the consciousness of the citizens, and therefore the policies and the things the government are putting in place are, in keeping with what we call the majority of the citizens' wishes. But if you can't see through that, even the mainstream media writes about the absurdity of that ideal, having anything to do with modern reality. But that's all part of the confusion, because those same liberal voices that are allowed to point out that we don't elect our leaders and people don't have any power, and wars are for the bankers, and all the kind of things that even come out in the mainstream liberal voices, they never do undermine entirely, do they? They don't give us an end game. They don't really tell us what what's the point of it all? Do they show us, like I said before, Anthony Sutton's research and writings about how in the 70s he was pointing out that we were talking about Russia and China as prospective enemies of the future, while we were transferring money and technology to them through our highest institutions and authorities, government authorities, every kind of authority. We were transferring, and Anthony Sutton was making the point that this transfer of technology and finance is what was, permitting them to be the threat that they were then being talked about through the other channels, military and otherwise. And so, how often is Anthony Sutton's work ever brought up in the liberal press to point out Russian aggression? As I've been pointing out, how often do the press in any place, alternative media, why don't they point out the fact that Russia, how could they be our enemy when we have funded them all along? For 100 years, they've been funded by the same banking system that took over America. So it doesn't mean they need Americans and Russians to love each other, obviously, but it does mean that the same group pulls the strings for both countries and always has. They control the money. They provide the financing. So it's the programs that they want put in place that get put in place. So we don't bring up any of that, nor the fact that Russia is in fact the Orthodox Christian country, and so how come we don't have a lot of things in common with them? How could they be our great enemy? Why are they so aggressive to their Christian brothers and sisters? What's the history of that? How come we don't know that? We're just ready to go to nuclear war with Russia, and we don't even know why. Because they're aggressive. But it's the NATO-aligned countries since World War II that have been aggressively reworking countries all over the world through CIA, through financing, through the World Bank, and all under the premise of increasing good for everyone, right? Democracy, increasing the productivity, reducing the disease and famines. When I grew up, we were going to feed everybody in Africa. I remember how important that was. America is going to feed everybody. And so instead we find out now when I get older that those were scams to get generous people to donate to foundations that in fact, if anything, what we can see now participated in a deeper scheme to send sterilization and eugenic programs to these poor countries. What's the results been, guys? 50 years later, 60 years later, what's the results been of this great and free country's occupation and aggressive spreading of their democratic values all over the world? Well, everybody's broken in debt to the U.S. dollar. Any investigation points to nothing but corruption and tyrannical use of the power that these people have had since World War II. So, my viewpoint in this channel, we're bringing you a perspective that is so alternative that even the alternative media doesn't want to touch it for the most part. Who's talking about Russia being our partner and China being our partner and there being a plan afoot that's deeper than these silly games we see presented in the media, which if you haven't, if you can't look at the history and, see 2 + 2, well then darn it, you're never going to learn to, you're not going to be much in the world of arithmetic. You have to watch out whenever it comes time for you to make an accurate measurement of anything. So, in that light, I would just like to present now, while I've got any voice left, this idea of a nuclear threat is what's been striking me lately. All my life, nuclear threat. As soon as they came up with a nuclear weapon and dropped it on some people to, I guess, test it to see how many people would it kill? What was the actual damage figures per exertion of energy, so that they could then calculate for the future what sort of bombs and what kind of damage they could do. Notice they've never dropped another one, and all the money went into tanks, airplanes, and superior ammunition, superior technology, perhaps satellite technology, and all these kind of things. We didn't keep the world at bay by threatening anybody else with a nuclear weapon. We just built weapons of every other kind, and got several countries around the world, including Russia, our partner on that side, to fund the red team, blue team. So the red team could get their weapons with the same technology, that America's making their weapons, because that's what was sold to the Russians by the Americans officially, not all the spy talk. That's a lot of the cover up. Read Anthony Sutton's work. Go listen to him for a couple hours on the internet and learn something about the reality that you live in. And so I'm starting to realize that, when you put together the way this whole mechanism unrolls through history, and again, I keep bringing us back to the last 100 years, because that's when the plan is obviously being rolled out for Palestine. If this isn't about Palestine, then it's a very interesting coincidence that while everybody in the world is broke, Israel's doing just fine. And the Zionist movement is on the precipice of being able to, let's just say the Greater Israel Project wound up with all those Sunni countries in the area that they claim is going to be part of Israel someday, have been destabilized and are at war. And I've been saying for some time that the result of that will be for America to then, through our propaganda media, tell us, what do we do now? Because, geez, look, it's a bunch of violent Sunni factions now, hardly better than ISIS or Al-Qaeda or the Syrians. And they're just going to fight now forever amongst each other in constant guerrilla wars, and the refugee crisis will never end. And what do we do? Who do we support now? That's got to be what's coming. And of course, it's got to lead to what I believe is the plan, to have a good caliph rise up in place of this bad caliph. The black caliph of ISIS will be replaced by the white caliph. And I will guess that it is the Hashemite king and not Erdogan, the Turkish president, whatever he is. He's not the president, prime minister of Turkey or whatever, because they're through our wag the dog media, they're making Turkey showing him as an enemy. He's not the right kind of guy. But of course, the Hashemite king, he's a partner with Israel, long-standing ally of the USA, and he's the one coincidentally having to deal with all the Palestinian refugees from that issue, and he's now dealing with the border crisis of Syria. He's the Hashemite king. So all that must just be a coincidence. But I say, I don't know. You get a Rothschilds-led banking cartel to claim they're Jewish and get the great Christian empire of England to go steal that land from the Arabs to create a homeland for Palestine because, we just want to see God's people back in the land. So when it's time to put God's people back in the land, you first you stage a Nazi, you raise up the Nazis out of World War I, and then stage a Holocaust, killing, of course, many Jews. Don't think for a minute I don't know that they killed, who knows how many people, who cares? The number doesn't matter. They killed so many innocent people. They first enslaved them, and these are the bankers of the West, not Nazi Germany, I'm sorry to tell you. Most of the German people were thought they were Christians and thought they were doing something they were supposed to, and the Jews were destroying their country, they were told, and they were being locked up in prison camps, but they weren't being told the extent of what was going on, which, as we know, were slave labor camps, not annihilation, not extermination camps. Slave labor camps set up by the American industrialists, led by people like Herbert Walker Bush and Harriman and Ford and Rockefeller. These are the guys that were making all the money off the slave labor, willingly and knowingly, of course, and funding this Nazi thing. Why? Because they loved Hitler? Obviously not. It didn't go very far. It served a purpose, which is why I'm trying to throw a little background here into this talk about nuclear weapons. What's the nuclear threat? What is the nuclear threat when you look at the way they play history like a violin to get what they want? What did they get out of World War II? Same thing they were building up for before World War I with this anti-Semitism. Gotta save, in over 100 years ago, turn of the 20th century, in the American newspapers, and in England, of course, the Western newspapers, gotta save the Jews from the imminent threat. 6 million Jews will be slaughtered by the Russian hordes, right? This was going on before the Balfour. This is what brings about the Balfour Declaration. What are we going to do for these poor Jews who the Russians, they're going to slaughter all 6 million of them. That's what they were. That's in the papers, okay? This isn't conspiracy theory. This is history for anyone who bothers to do the research. So what comes out of that but Balfour Declaration? Hey, we intend to make a safe homeland back in the old land for these Jews so they can return home. What happens some years later? World War I. And what comes out of that but the slaughter of Christianity in Russia after the Bolshevik Revolution? The absolute genocidal slaughter for almost 100 years. I mean, in 3 years, they starved 10 million Ukrainian Christians to death. Who is the they? Same people who got their way with the Federal Reserve System in America around the same time. Same people who Professor Quigley talks about in the 60s as being the banking cartel that runs the world. But, oh no, we got a Russian threat, we got nuclear threat, North Korean threat, China threat. What narrative are you guys on out there? Is what, I'm not talking to you guys that listen to me. That's why you're here. The rest of you, if you've listened to the first 24 minutes, what kind of narrative are you on? What do you think you're getting through the New York Times? The Washington Post, CNN, RT, Al Jazeera, Fox News. Do you think there's a word of truth in any of it that isn't truth used in deception? Of course there's truth. You can't have a deception without, deception is literally the offering of an alternate truth. So there's got to be some perception of something being true for there to be a deception. So it's not pure fiction. It's that the narrative is not reality. The narrative is a deception. It's an alternate reality. So that to talk about Russian aggression and what do we do? What do we do with NATO? How do we fix America? How do we make America great again? Why would Hillary be better than Trump? Why is Trump better than Obama? What's the best answer to Obamacare? Are you kidding me? If you're stuck in any of these narratives, boy, oh boy, no wonder, the status quo is just going to be swept out from underneath your feet. And all of a sudden, the world you knew doesn't exist anymore. That's how I already feel because I've been unplugged for some years. And so I've been able to stand a little bit outside of it and observe and research while everyone else is still trying to fix it. I started that way 10 years ago, blogging, and I'm going to fix it. What do we do? I remember when the Tea Party movement started, and I was still thinking, hey, maybe, is this a group that's trying to do something? I didn't realize that, no, if you're seeing it over your iPhone, then it's probably part of the deception. If it's popular at all, if they talk about it on television, it's certainly part of the deception. If they put me on television, they will only put me on there to show you something that makes it look like I'm a wacko. That the kind of, they would never present what I'm saying as something that has to be argued, against, or that has any viable foundation. So that's what I'm saying. It's not that everyone out there is there to deceive you. It's that every angle you're presented with is there to bend the truth into the deception they want you to go with. So are there nuclear weapons? I don't know. Probably. Those tests look real. They come from long enough ago, and they didn't have computer graphics. The tests in Bikini Island that you always see, and at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I'm assuming that was what we've all grown up to acknowledge as nuclear weapons. What I want to say is, what's this nuclear threat that we talk about as if it's so important in the world? And I think it's a hoax myself. I think that the nuclear threat is the red herring to get everybody chasing something that's, of course, got nothing to do. Because meanwhile, no one talks about the fact that we just keep building more sophisticated weaponry in a world, choking on it, broke from buying it, locked in continual hostilities, because this is the method and the formula that's been set up to solve hostilities, is to stabilize your region by increasing your military spending and and the technology of your weaponry. Which is like it's that game at the beginning of baseball when each person puts the hand on top of the other going up the bat, right? To see whose hand winds up on top. That doesn't make much sense unless you want a world full of weapons and a bunch of people, trained and prepared and programmed to use them as the only, reasonable response. So I'm saying, in order to build a world, where that's going on, you would need to distract a world that was concerned with war and death and destruction, mindless, senseless. And so, nuclear, the bomb. Is Russia going to drop the bomb? Are we going to drop the bomb? Let's make Hollywood movies about the bomb, right? Or How I Learned to Love the Bomb. So, while everyone's talking about the bomb, I don't see how the bomb has gone anywhere it wasn't already in the 40s and 50s, whereas all the things the United Nations promised to do, the promise of this great institution, seems to have failed miserably if you're going to look at it based on its own stated goals. So to think that the most powerful people in the world, running the world in the way that we can observe, and that has been demonstrated for us through professors like Quigley and Sutton and others, even Chomsky to a point, though he's probably, limited, as I've always said, in what he's allowed. He's worked for MIT all his life, so come on, he's most likely sort of controlled resistance for that super intellectual crowd that their knowledge doesn't allow them to travel down the rabbit holes that they don't want traveled, like 9/11 and such, the war on terrorism. You always find Chomsky's, the Federal Reserve, all the things that are truly undermine the narrative, he doesn't point out. He points out how our imperialism, the war machine, he's able to talk about our crimes, our war crimes around the world, because those are covered up by a threat of nuclear holocaust. So nobody seems to really want to put our war crimes as the forefront of a discussion about making America great again. So anyway, but there are these people that have certainly illustrated the way in which our world is run and governed, and especially our Western world. And I'm just saying the way you see it presented to us with the, North Korea, they're constantly testing weapons, but we always just see the same video. We never see what can be demonstrated as a current speech by their leader. We don't see that. They don't show us the evidence of any of their stories. So if you don't see the real house of cards nature of it, then you can know that you're still stuck in the illusion. If you still wonder which of your favorite talking heads or journalists and newspapers you should go to find out if what I'm saying has any basis, well, then you're lost, and you won't find the truth until you understand the foundational idea that all of those resources are there to deceive you into a narrative that keeps you from seeing what's actually going on and why. And so I encourage people to, the last couple of weeks, I think we've been really nailing it down with the target Iran and the last Bible study, even with our talk about the false prophet that we talked a little bit about from the eschatological and religious standpoint anyway, how the plan seems to fit the geopolitical scheme. So anyway, I want to make this a little short because my voice isn't so strong today, but I still ask people to pay attention to these, to the idea that the things that they present you with as the most vital right now and biggest issues through both regular media like the LBGT and the pro and against Trump rallies and all this kind of build a wall with Mexico. They obviously want everybody distracted with that because it's meaningless talk and has nothing to do with except to make more movies that they call news on TV with all their actors and all their stock footage and all their faked terrorist attacks and everything else. Even the alt media, they're trying to sell this. I notice right now the trend is the surveillance state. Just like the nuclear weapon. It's the new big scare for Americans. The surveillance state, because of course, that's what these people in control have the time and money and resources to do. Yes, we know they have the technology, or we've been shown it in the wag the dog world of television, so we assume they have this technology, and we're told, of course, they want to watch everybody. That's what we have to be most worried about. That's what's got Americans that are watching their alt media, all these alt media channels. They keep wanting to show you robots, artificial intelligence. It's going to take all your jobs and surveillance. They're watching you through your computer. And, again, distracting from the fact that probably none of that's really going on because it's too expensive and meaningless. And so the people they want to watch, of course, they can. So why do they want to watch you and me? It doesn't make any sense. A waste of money, isn't it? And so they just want to stimulate the division and the argument. They want to keep people distracted and tense so they can't pay attention. Keep the alternative media filling up with distraction stories about how robots are going to take over, how UFOs are going to attack, or the hoax of UFOs is going to, how they're trying to open portals through the CERN. All these different stories that have nothing to do with the fact that they've been trying to do something in Palestine for 100 years. That at that time, 100 years ago, they did three things which are certainly all connected. They started the Bolshevik Revolution to kill all the Christians. They funded the Federal Reserve Bank to get a hold of the people of America and turn them into false Christians, because you can see that's what happened. The little warriors, the army and the military that would support Zionism, because the third thing they did was say, we intend to move back to Palestine. And in the last 100 years, that's what's gone on. That's what's going on. And all the media that's attracting us now back to the threat with Israel. I saw they're practicing grand evacuations in case Hamas and Hezbollah send an attack. They're staging surprise military drills like a ground attack on Gaza. All this stimulated by the UN denying that Israel has anything to do with Jerusalem. The UN condemning the settlement building once again, and of course our great president, the leader of the American people, Donald Trump, the speaker for the consciousness of the American people, stating that yes, even though it will result in a bloodbath in the Middle East, we intend to move the embassy to Jerusalem. So of course all of this is hype, but if I'm right and the whole thing's a 100-year plan, this Greater Israel project to take over that land, which isn't the end of the plan, because that only provokes, as we talked about in Target Iran and Orthodox Christian Russia, and out of necessity, China, to now come into an absolute world conflict that will accomplish the three things that I say the people who have been pulling the levers for 100 years want accomplished. They want the world depopulated, not only because of the eugenic platform of not wanting these lesser individuals to breed or to have the opportunity to keep breeding, but also because less people's much easier to control and much less strain on every environment and resource. More for themselves, right? That's just natural. Who wants to, if you have a limited size house, the last thing you want is it to be full of people that you have to feed and take care of. The fewer the better. So there's that natural side to it, that if you have the power to rule the world, one of the things you don't need is all these masses of people that are the only thing that actually could stop you if they somehow could come together, which explains the psychological operation ongoing for at least the last 100 years while you've got this plan to get in control of the human mind, know how to work it anyway, know what it's about, know how to manipulate it, so you can reduce the chances that all these people could go against you. So the second part of the plan that must be, that's obvious, is central control of the money. That's how they got to this part of this stage that we've been in the last 100 years, that Rothschilds clearly pointed out sometime before that. Give me control of a nation's money, right? A couple 100 years ago. I don't care who makes the laws. And so, of course, they were trying to do it with America from the beginning of the 19th century. They had a charter from the end of the 18th century for 20 years in America. It came up in 1810 or 11, I guess, and the Congress said, oh, no, you bunch of crooks, you den of vipers, we're not giving our country over to you. And so, of course, Rothschild said either the Congress will renew that charter or America will find itself in a most disastrous war, which starts the next year with England, who the Rothschilds banking cartel was also running. So sent these peoples to war. How many people die now in the War of 1812? And what follows that? The bank charter is renewed until Andrew Jackson defeats the bank. And it's not until 1913 that the Federal Reserve, but the push never stopped. The assassinations, the intrigue and infiltration into American Congress and politics hadn't stopped in that 100 years. You can go do your history and research. See how they get control. So they get control of the money supply. So they've had that for nearly 100 years, set up their central banks. What does that do? Well, you take gold out of circulation. There's no real money anymore, no intrinsic money that make a nation or a people strong, because they have their own money based on value, based on the things they produce. No, they have a fiat currency that's only based on basically the guns, because the politics, especially in our modern day, is such that it's only redeemable for what the government says at any one time, and they change their mind and they tell you what it's worth. And you can tell by the way they print it that they don't mind making it worthless, ultimately. And so our money is a big lie and a big scam. So what is it? What's the purpose of it? They know what it is. I say it's a temporary lever. It was a lever because debt slavery is the lever that you can see through history has undermined all these different nations. Through debt slavery that then gets enforced by first just policy making, right? You don't have to go in there and take everything with your military unless they refuse to pay the debt. You see what's going on with Greece. So this is just, a particular focus point of what's been going on for 100 years, 200 years or more through finance. Debt slavery. So it's a lever. But at the end of that lever, with all this useless paper money that people can still stash in boxes or hide from you or avoid paying their taxes, what's the end game there but another system in which all of that fiat paper finally crashes because it can't be supported? Well, then you have to go to something for the good of everyone, don't you? And that's already been introduced to us as this electronic system of currency. No more physical currency. People think it's going to already try and tout it as so great without realizing it's the uncontested slavery of yourself, of society. You cannot do anything without their say-so. You're an absolute slave if you can't have your own bit of value that you can trade with others that is authentic and reliable and verifiable. No, you have a number. You're a number in a computer that can be turned off for any arbitrary reason. Oh, we didn't get your payment. But I sent it in. We didn't get it. Well, but I can't afford to pay it again. Okay. So it's absolute slavery. It's the worst thing any human being could be, even the fact that the Western culture think it can even be sold the wag the dog tail that it's so great. It shows the level of hypnotic, brain dead, brainwashing that's gone on to Western society through their understanding of human psychology and how to get in our heads. But for them, it is the final move economically. Once you have central control of a electronic system, probably a biometric system based on people's eyes or skin or fingerprint, or they don't have to tattoo you. They can to make it easy for you. You'll beg for the tattoo when the time comes that you can't buy or sell. You can't eat unless they get some form of identification for you so that your electronic pay can be credited to you. And of course, at some point after the war, it won't be electronic pay. It'll be the subsidy amount, right? This universal currency, this universal subsidy they're already talking about through Davos, this really scary slavery where you don't own anything. You're just, right? Your electronic account is simply issued enough credits that you can trade those to live. It sounds very sci-fi and Orwellian if it wasn't for the fact that it can clearly be seen to be what's being put in process, and is certainly what's important to the people that have all the money, since Rothschild's been saying it for a couple hundred years or more. Got to have control of a nation's money supply. So it's distracted by all the AI and the robots and, oh, isn't it neat? Look at the tattoo and, ooh, mark of the beast and all the crap that they distract us with to not get under the story that what the people in charge obviously really want is one, less people, and two, those people under absolute financial control, which comes from some sort of biometric electronic currency system, which will certainly come after the Great War, in my opinion. And the third thing that they want, and it's less explainable than the others unless you are either an occultist or have some monotheistic religious background. But apparently the people that, that run the world, as we can see through their affiliations of secret societies and Masons that, worship Egyptian gods and the pyramids, and they want to rebuild Solomon's temple. So you can debate why that really is, but there's no doubt that there's many people in power that sure spent a lot of money presenting that in their own inner sanctuaries of occult display and ritual. So I would say that, in fact, that's why Palestine's been so important the last 100 years, is the people that truly have the power and want to rule the world, and want to rule less people with an absolute controlled monetary system. They want to do it from their throne on that hill in Jerusalem where, coincidentally, the scriptures of both Muslim, Christian, and Jew say, God, once had a temple and is destined to rule again the world forever. And so that seems to be the draw, whether, as we say, it's a true Luciferian spiritual aspect or just a bunch of materialists, who have a sense of humor and perspective. That's how you make it happen. There's religious people waiting for it to happen. So let's be those religious people and let's make it happen. And the true religious people, will change their mind along the way or kill them so that they won't be a threat. The rest of the people, since we will become the new leaders of the world, uncontested, we'll lead them any way we want. We'll call it religion, we'll call it not religion. It doesn't matter at that point. So I say you don't have to be a crazy occultist Luciferian to believe that the third thing that they want to do is build this temple in Jerusalem, simply because that satisfies this final phase of their operation to have succeeded in doing what all the religious people say God will do. They are then God, aren't they? So anyway, guys, nuclear threat, surveillance state, robots taking over, UFOs, opening the gates of hell. I mean, the way I read the scripture anyway, it seems like, God is in control of the gates of hell. He does the locking up and the letting out. They don't seem to be, I don't find one single scripture in which they let themselves in and out, or man lets them in and out. So on almost any level, all of that is just pure sci-fi and fiction. And on a deeper level, it's certainly wag the dog distraction. And on the deepest level, it's very purposeful and meaningful distraction to get us all into a psychological type of state where our awareness is geared toward moving in a direction they've already got planned, I think, for both a peace movement that gets us all to really acknowledge which side we're on, and then the war that comes out of the breaking of that peace movement, to which, we will all feel very compelled to fight for the side. It will almost, I think, be compelling beyond resistance, like when your house is broken into and there's nothing you can do but, get up off the couch and fight the people that have broken in. I feel that they're trying to set up the great war so that it can't be resisted and will be zealously participated in by many peoples, and why they've funded this increase of weaponry and hostilities over these, especially in the last couple of decades, and with the war on terror and all that, so that it can come to that fruition. So anyway, don't be fooled, guys. Don't be fooled. They're going to make peace. These wars have an agenda behind them, I believe. The nuclear threat, I'd still love to hear people's opinion on that. What do you know about that, or think or what do you think the odds are that what they really are going to do, since they've built if the nuclear weapons, sorry, that's my dog protecting me. What are they going to do with all the nuclear weapons if they've built all these nuclear weapons? If they've funded Russia, if they sent the technology there, in China and Israel and India and Pakistan, is it because they're really going to use nuclear weapons to launch all over the world at each other to wipe out people? Do they need to do that? So I want to leave us with those questions, and I would like, anyone that feels like participating, I'd sure like to see a discussion of some kind. So thanks. Talk to you soon.